For context, I, 30 female, have been married to my husband Matthew, 30 male, for 5 years. He had an older brother who was also married, his brother Colin, 35 male, and his sister-in-law Jackie, 32 female, had been married for 7 years. Matthew and I met when we were in business school and had been with each other for almost 7 years before we finally got married. So we have been together for 12 years, if we're counting that. Colin and Jackie met through friends and they had been together for 2 years before they got married. So they had been together for almost 9 years, which is also a really long time. All of us always got along really well. Both Colin and Jackie were really good friends of mine too. We could go out on double dates and stuff, and I treated the two of them like my own family, and that's how much I love them. Colin and Jackie also became parents a year ago, and I had even babysat for them several times, never knowing the truth. Quite unfortunately, Colin and Jackie both passed away in a really bad car accident about a month ago. It was a tragedy that literally shook up our entire family, and their funeral was probably the saddest I have ever felt in my entire life. Both my husband and I are inconsolable, and I think we were the ones who had cried the most that day. It has been very difficult for us as a family with this and coping with the grief of what had happened. The worst part of all, and maybe the best as well, is that they left behind their 1-year-old daughter. I say it was the worst thing because now she will have to grow up as an orphan and never be able to know her parents, no matter how much love is showered on her. Nothing will ever make up for that, but I am happy that she survived since she was at home and wasn't in the car with them. Since we did not know what to do after her parents had passed away, my in-laws decided that they were going to take care of her for the time being until they knew exactly what to do. My in-laws would have gladly taken her in, but unfortunately my father-in-law suffers from motor neuron disease, and my mother-in-law spends most of her time trying to take care of him. So it's not possible for them to take their granddaughter and raise her, since it'll be a lot of work, and there's also the fact that both of them are quite elderly and can't run around behind a 1-year-old. Nevertheless, they still agreed to take care of her until Matthew had figured out a way to deal with this. Now, personally, I did not have any problems with babysitting, but I had made it very clear to Matthew that I did not see myself taking on the role of a mother at any point in the future. And both of us had discussed this several times and had come to the conclusion that we did not want kids. So as much as I love Jackie's daughter, I could not raise her because that was just too big of a commitment, and I was not interested in being a mother. So it was better for me not to be a mother than to be a bad one. So Matthew and I started looking for people who were willing to adopt. We were lucky that their daughter was still young and hadn't known her parents for long enough. So the adoption procedure was going to be easier for her than it would have been had she been slightly older. She had been living with her grandparents for the last few weeks, but then 9 days ago, Matthew brought her home after work and informed me that he had taken over her responsibility, and now it was going to be the two of us who had to take care of her until we had found the right people to adopt her and make her part of their family now. I agreed to that because I knew it was going to be a temporary arrangement, and eventually we would be able to find a loving home for her. Besides, after what had happened to Colin and Jackie, I did not have the heart to say no, and both of us were still grieving them. So I did not feel right to say that I would not be willing to take care of their daughter. It was kind of difficult because both of us had to compromise on our work hours and come back home earlier than usual, since the sitter was not willing to stay that long and was asking for an exorbitant amount of money, which did not seem right for our budget. We had to make a lot of changes around the house in a few days, but I was ready to do it all for the sake of Colin, Jackie, and their daughter. It was nice to have her around, and it also kept us distracted from the pain of losing her parents, since they were very important to us. I had also started considering adopting her and telling Matthew that I did not want to give her up because I had grown quite attached to her. and my feelings on parenthood and motherhood had started changing. But unfortunately, I still had to make a tough decision of leaving it all behind because of what I had found in the bag that Matthew had brought her with all her belongings and stuff. I think most of you might have been able to guess where I'm going with this by everything that has happened so far. But never in a million years would I ever have imagined something of the sort. And I'm still having a hard time believing that it's the truth. So yes, Matthew is the real father of Jackie's daughter. I found out about it when I found her birth certificate and the results of a paternity test at the bottom of the bag that I mentioned. When he had brought her home, he had also packed all her belongings in a duffel bag, and a couple of days ago, I was looking in there because I wanted to check if she had any socks in there since the weather was getting kind of chilly, and I couldn't find it in the socks that she usually wore around the house. While going through that, I found a file inside, and when I opened it, that's what was waiting for me there. I had taken a day off from work because I had a bit of a cold coming on. Matthew was at work when I found out, and it took me a couple of minutes to realize that the documents were authentic and not fake. For a few minutes after reading through those papers, I was numb. I didn't even know how to react because, like I have mentioned above, all of us were really close, and we had been together for so long that I don't think anybody would have imagined something like this could even happen. But it was right there. The proof was in front of my eyes, and I couldn't deny it even if I wanted to. I literally broke down in the middle of the room and started wailing crazy. I think I might have even scared the neighbors with how hard I was crying. After being together for almost 12 years, you never expected something like this from your partner, so it was very difficult for me to process. But I pulled myself together within half an hour and decided to stop crying and called my lawyer up immediately. I sent him photos of what I had, and for good measure I took them with me while I was leaving the house, and I still have them with me. After I had spoken to my lawyer, the reality of the situation hit me, and even though I was really sad, I was also equally angry. I don't even think that anger begins to explain how I felt. I was infuriated. And he was really lucky that he was not at home that day because I might have done something to him that could not be undone. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. But anyway, I was really upset, and so I decided to take photos of the documents that I had found. And in my rage, I decided to send them to everybody in his family. And when I say everybody, I'm not even kidding. I mean literally every single person whose contact information I had on my phone. I just blindly selected all the contacts and sent it to them with the caption that said that I now knew the truth about Matthew, and I wanted to know what kind of a person he was as well. After sending that text, I started packing my things as quickly as I could so I would be able to get out of the house before Matthew came back home. I had to do something about Jackie's daughter as well because I was not going to leave a 1-year-old at home alone no matter what was going on. I was pissed off with Matthew, not with her. She was just a baby. She didn't even know what was going on. So I decided to take her along with me and move to my parents' house. When I reached their house that day, I had been crying in the cab while heading over to their place anyway, so when I finally got there, I had already been crying for a while. And when I saw my mother open the door, I broke down into tears again and did not stop crying for about the next hour. I had turned my phone off so that nobody would be able to reach me because I simply did not want to be contacted, especially by anybody from Matthew or his family. I was in a really bad place at the time, and I would say that I still am because there is no easy way to deal with this. Anyway, after I had told my parents about what I had found and shown them the proof, they told me that I had made the right decision by choosing to file for a divorce and talking to my lawyer immediately. There was no going back from this. Later that evening, Matthew showed up at my parents' house, but it was so that he could take his niece back home with him. It's not like he did not try to talk to me, but my parents made it very clear to him that I was not interested in speaking to him. I think he was there, standing in the doorway and refusing to leave for about half an hour, constantly arguing with my parents and demanding that they let him in so he could talk to me. He insisted that he could explain everything, but I'm not an idiot. What happened? No explanation of his was going to change the truth. I was really disappointed, and part of me actually wanted to go down and talk to him myself so that I would at least be able to get some clarity or some closure, but I decided against it because I did not trust myself or my emotions, and I did not want to act rashly. Everything was still very fresh that day, and I couldn't deal with any of this drama at that point. So I chose to stay in my room quietly and let him argue with my parents and then leave instead of going downstairs to talk to him myself. So he left with his niece, and I only turned on my phone after that. As soon as I turned my phone back on, I was bombarded with messages from everybody who had received my text earlier, where I had sent them the pictures of the documents and talked about how I finally knew what Matthew really was and what he had been up to behind my back. Everybody was apologizing, even though it was not their fault. But I could sense that even though they were apologizing, it was more like, we are sorry, but now that it's done, you have to take him back because you guys have been together for so long. And not, we are really sorry that this happened to you, and whatever you think is appropriate, you should do that. Most of the messages that I received had that vibe. People were saying things like, this is unacceptable, it's outrageous, and whatnot. But the next message was mostly just them talking about how we had been together for 12 years and how they did not want to tell me what to do, but they were sure that we would be able to work things out and would really love for us to stay together. They did say that ultimately it was my call to make, but I knew that if they got to know that I had already spoken to my lawyer and filed for a divorce, they would not be pleased with that. I have not blocked Matthew anywhere yet because I'm still very confused about what I should do. He has been sending me messages and trying to call me ever since I left, but I haven't been responding because I just don't know what to do now. My mother sent me a message last evening saying that there is an explanation for all of this, but she thinks that it would be better for Matthew to explain it to me. And for that to happen, I have to actually speak to him. She kind of implied that I shouldn't just cut him off without even bothering to hear his side of the story, and that I need to talk to him at least. So I messaged her back, finally, saying that I did not need to respond to him because I had seen with my own eyes what the documents said, and I knew the truth now. I highly doubt that he would be able to say anything that could change the fact. And she told me that I had seen what was true, but I still needed to talk to him to get to the bottom of this. Not doing so would just make it so much worse because people in the family were already reeling from the loss of Colin and Jackie, and this would just shatter Matthew and his family. I am in a very difficult position, and I have no idea how to go about this. AITA for not wanting to talk to my husband after I found out he was his niece's biological father. Update 1. Hi, after going through the comments on the original post, I decided to talk to my husband after all. I hadn't been responding to any of Matthew's calls and texts, but after reading the comments, I opened his chat and finally replied that I was ready to talk to him. He hadn't said much in his text. He just kept telling me that he really wanted to talk to me and explain everything. Not that there was much to explain, it's pretty much what I thought. But what he said made me realize that I was right to file for a divorce immediately. I met him this morning and he came over to visit me. He looked very upset and started off by apologizing to me for keeping this a secret for so long. And then he started telling me that he and Jackie had only hooked up once and it meant nothing to either of them and both of them regretted it. I did not buy that because it seemed unlikely that they would get together only once. It was just a gut feeling. And Jackie was no longer here, so she couldn't tell me the truth either. Anyway, he told me that coincidentally both of us had been fighting, and so had she and Colin. He says that he doesn't remember what we were fighting about, but it was something petty, and he had left the house in a huff and had headed over to Colin's house to talk to him. But when he got there, he couldn't find Colin, and Jackie explained to him that he had also left because they had been fighting. She looked very upset, and when Matthew asked her what they had been fighting about, she broke down into tears and he started trying to comfort her. She invited him in and explained to him that they had been fighting about whether they were ready for a baby or not. And Colin wanted a child and Jackie was just not ready. So that's what they had been fighting about, and he got really mad, so he left to cool down. Matthew started trying to comfort her, and one thing led to another, so they ended up sleeping together that day. He told me that and did not come back home until really late that day, and she wanted somebody to be there for her because she was really upset, and that's why he had stayed there instead of coming back, and he apologized to me for making such a huge mistake. He told me that both he and Jackie discussed it later and agreed never to bring it up again because it was just a mistake and it would literally never happen again, since they knew that they loved us and would never do anything to hurt us, which is ironic given the circumstances. But shortly after that, she got pregnant, and even though she had decided earlier that she did not want kids, as she was not yet ready, she did not want to break Colin's heart, and so she decided to go through with the pregnancy. Both of them were really stressed out until the baby was born, and after that, when they found out her true parentage, they decided to keep it a secret from both of us and agreed that Jackie and Colin would raise their daughter as their own and never bring this up again. Jackie was a lawyer and she dealt with all the paperwork, which is how she was able to avoid Colin finding out about any of the details on the birth certificate. And Colin trusted Jackie blindly, so he never bothered to double check anything. They had listed Matthew as the true father of her daughter, since Jackie had the forethought to think that in case anything happened to her, she would want the baby to go to him next. I can't imagine how Colin was never able to find out about any of this for so long, almost a year. He must have really trusted Jackie, and I guess he was too busy adoring his daughter to care about any of the documentation and paperwork. It was a clever move on Jackie and Matthew's part, not such a clever move to keep the paperwork in the file in the bag and not bother to properly hide it from me. After Matthew was done telling me everything, I told him that it was too late for the truth, and in any case, I had already spoken to my lawyer and started to prepare for a divorce. This did not change my mind in the least. It was overall quite disappointing, since I had expected that they would genuinely have an explanation that would change my mind, since they have been behaving like talking to Matthew once would change everything. He and his family had literally been begging me to give him a chance to explain, but this was not something that made me think any differently. It just made me think that I was right to file for divorce because you just can't recover from something like this. Not after 12 years of being together. I don't think anybody in my place would have forgiven him or even given him a chance to talk to me like I did today. Anyway, when I told him that I was not going to change my mind, he started begging me for another chance and told me that he could not live without me. He even said that he had already lost his brother and such a close friend of his that he could not afford to lose me as well, and that he needed me to be there for him because he was going through so much. I almost laughed out loud because of the people that he had lost. I had also lost those very same people. I had been equally close to his brother and sister-in-law, and the four of us had been a group, but he and Jackie were the ones who screwed us over. I don't bear any ill will towards Jackie, but I can't forgive Matthew. And even in such a situation, he was thinking about what he had been through and not me. He was the one who screwed up. This was his fault, and I was the one who had lost two of my close friends, and then found out that my husband had been cheating on me and even had a daughter with another woman who happened to be so close to me. All in the span of just 1 month. It couldn't have been easy for me either, but I was still trying to deal with it with dignity. I explained all of this to him, but he just refused to understand and kept begging me to come back to him. After one point, it started getting on my nerves, so I just told him that he had to leave, and if he didn't, I would be forced to call the cops on him and have him removed from the property. So he left after that, but he told me that he would be back and he was not going to give up until I came back to him. He sounded pretty determined, but it honestly just doesn't make a difference to me anymore. He has broken me in ways I did not think was possible. But it's done now, and I feel like an idiot for even giving him a chance to explain. I don't know what I was thinking, but at least now I know the whole story, and I know that I cannot forgive him, not now and not ever. Update 2. I just spoke to my lawyer. It has been a week and a half since I left my home, and he finally told me that the papers were going to be served to my husband tomorrow. I have mixed feelings about all of those. On one hand, I'm relieved that we can finally start the divorce proceedings. It's been slightly delayed since my lawyer had to deal with some personal medical issues this past week. The work had been slow, but now we can finally start the proceedings and I can just get it over with and try to move on with my life. On the other hand, I feel shattered because this beautiful chapter of my life, which had been beautiful so far, is coming to an end for such an ugly reason. I was already finding it really difficult to cope with the loss of 2 of my friends, and now I have to deal with a divorce as well. So that's slightly sad, but I'm trying to find the silver lining. That's the only way I can get through all of this, and I hope that the divorce procedure isn't as emotionally draining as life recently has been. Update 3. Hi, so Matthew was served with the divorce papers today. The first thing that he chose to do was visit me again, probably hoping that speaking to me in person would make me change my mind. He has been texting me and trying to call me ever since I told him to leave, but I went back to ignoring him. I also blocked everybody from his family because I did not have anything left to say to those people anymore. All of them have been trying to convince me to go back to Matthew, and that tells me everything I need to know. They have only ever cared about Matthew, not me. The love that his family had shown me was for Matthew's wife and not me as a person, so I blocked everybody who had been telling me to go back to him, because if they really wanted the best for me, they would understand that what Matthew did was horribly wrong, and lying to me and keeping it a secret was even worse. So they would understand why I wanted to leave and why I'm not staying in that marriage anymore. Instead, they refused to understand my point of view and continued to harp on that the 2 of us were great together, and we had been together for so long it did not make sense to leave over something like this. My mother-in-law actually said that since Jackie was gone, I had nothing to worry about. I can't believe a human being could say something horrible about another person, especially after being so close for so long. I don't know if Jackie was a good person or not, but what my mother-in-law said was really below the belt. Anyway, that's pretty much the last straw for me. Then I blocked them all. But coming back to what happened today, after Matthew found out that I was actually going through the divorce, he showed up at my parents' house. My dad was the one who was in the living room when he showed up, and as soon as he frantically started ringing the doorbell and banging on the door, demanding that we open up, my dad told him that he had to leave or he would call the cops. But instead of just leaving, Matthew decided that he was going to stay and create even more trouble. So he told my father to bring it on and said that he was not leaving until he had talked to me and convinced me to cancel the proceedings. I guess he forgot that he was speaking to my father and not me. My dad did not have a soft corner for him like I did, and he went through with his threat. He had told him that he would call the cops, and that's what he did. So Matthew was forcibly removed from our property. He didn't even go respectfully. He went kicking and screaming. It was just really embarrassing for him. And I was watching it all from my room, not even bothering to go out because that would just lead to more trouble. Anyway, he was taken away, or rather dragged away, and that was that. I'm actually pretty relieved that my dad dealt with it and did not allow me to deal with it, because no matter what, I still have a soft corner for him, and that would have made it very difficult for me to report him. At least he got what he deserved. Update 4. I have been blocked by Matthew. Yep, that happened. I just find it really funny because I did not block him. He did. I can't imagine why he would do so when I am already ignoring him and not bothering him at all. It'll just make it difficult for us to communicate directly during the divorce, that's it. Ultimately, it's his decision. Well, his decision was influenced by his family. His mother sent me an email after that day when we called the cops on him and he was forcibly removed from our property. She mentioned in the email that she was incredibly disappointed that our family would do something like this and treat him like a criminal when he was only trying to get me back. She was acting like we were the villains for doing what any other family in our place would have done. She did not even seem to care for the fact that it was Matthew who had been acting unhinged and had spoken in a very harsh tone to my father. It's not like he hadn't been warned. My father had told him that if he didn't leave, he would call the cops on him. He had been warned, and yet he chose to stay there. After that, we were not responsible for what happened to him. He was trying to compensate for his mistakes in the past, in her opinion. And she was basically just playing the victim and said that she couldn't believe that in spite of having such a close relationship for so many years, my family put him through something like this and I would sit by and allow it to happen. She expressed how disappointed she was that I hadn't even bothered to come out of the house to check on him and make sure that he was right, even as he was being taken away. So she told me towards the end of the email that her son would not be bothering me anymore and that she was going to make sure that he moved on from me as quickly as he could. Well, good luck to her with that. God knows I want the same things as well for both of us. But anyway, game on. Now I'm only going to focus on getting what I deserve from the divorce and nothing else. No sympathy, no mercy, and definitely no soft corners anymore. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.